What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's weekend roundup, both domestic and international competition to get to. And I have been consistent and insistent across the beginning of this international window in these 4 games for the U.S. men's national team that after those first two against the World Cup, fellow World Cup competitors, we weren't going to learn anything. A, because the squad was going to be rotated. Greg Berhalter made the right decision in prioritizing the friendlies against the higher level opposition. And B, because of the level of opposition. And then Jesus Ferreira went out and scored 4 goals in a game in the Nations League against Grenada, which in and of itself doesn't do all that much for me. There's a real argument you could have thrown any of these strikers we're talking about in this discussion about who's going to play the number 9, and they would have done the exact same thing. Before I get to that part of this, though, Ferreira's 4 goals stole the show, but we have to give props to Luca De La Torre, Kellen Acosta, and Paul Arriola. De La Torre and Acosta in particular. And De La Torre is getting his plaudits on social media, and deservedly so. He was the best player on the field, hands down. Kellen Acosta was right behind him, though. And what Acosta gives you, especially in a world where Darlington Nagbe is no longer a factor in this team, Michael Bradley is no longer a factor in this team, Jordy Mihailovic may or may not be a factor in this team, is somebody who can create with passing. Right, you've got all of these terrific ball carriers, your Yunus Musas, your Weston McKennies, your Luca De La Torres. You don't have the incisive passing in this midfield. And yes, it was Granada, but Kellen Acosta ripped him apart. And of course, there's also the set pieces that he's been excellent on throughout his national team career. And he gives you cover at the number 6 for Tyler Adams in a position where there aren't really many options there. I mean, Adams is going to play and basically play every game he possibly can, but you need somebody else on this roster capable of doing that, and that's Kellen Acosta. So if there was any question whether he was going on that plane to the World Cup, if he's healthy, I don't think it's a question at this point. They were both terrific. Paul Arriola also did himself plenty of good with his performance. But back to the Ferreira thing. This does carry an added significance and may end up as the turning point in this number 9 discussion. And when we get to the start of the World Cup and they're lining up against Wales, I think there's a good chance we're looking back at this and saying that's the moment this all changed. And I say that for sort of 2 reasons. One, Ferreira has clearly been the guy Berhalter wants to take this position. It's the reason he gave him this 3rd game in a row when his performance in the other 2 didn't justify it. He does all of those little things that are so important to Berhalter in the way he wants to play. So if you're predisposed to give him as many opportunities as possible, somebody's going to have to do something to take it from him. And obviously nobody's done that. He hasn't locked it down, but nobody's really made it a discussion about, well, is that the guy? Can he take it from Ferreira? It's been a conversation about, well, who do we feel good about? If you don't feel good about anybody, you're going to probably stick with Ferreira. And then the second part of this is what this performance means moving forward. Because to me, this is not about, oh, he scored 4 goals. Look at what he did. Now he has to start because he scored 4 goals. And now his numbers from a efficiency standpoint in a U.S. shirt look terrific. I don't care about that. What I care about is the quality of finishes and the performance he put in. The chances he took and put in the back of the net are the exact ones that nobody has been able to consistently capitalize on for this team. It has been the problem with that number 9 position. He's been doing it for FC Dallas, And he wasted a couple good opportunities against Uruguay. All of a sudden, they started going in. And that doesn't really have a lot to do with the opposition. That has to do with Ferreira's ability to execute and take advantage of those chances when they come his way. Because you're not going to get that many in a World Cup group with Iran, Wales, and England. So there's that part of it, that he actually, that translates. Now, his breakdown, and when you look at the quality of opposition he's scored goals against, isn't great. But to me, that part of it does carry over and gives me some confidence. And the second part of this is just giving him the ability to sort of operate in a confident, free headspace. Because that had to be weighing on him. And so now, why I think this is going to be such a pivotal moment in this conversation about the number 9 is that clearly is going to keep him in the pole position heading into these last two tune-ups in the fall before the World Cup. And if he can just sort of continue that confidence while playing for the U.S. and the weight that just got lifted off of his back and keep scoring for FC Dallas, I see this being a snowball effect where he just needed to see the ball go in the back of the net again, and all of a sudden we're having a different conversation. This could all very quickly change if it doesn't carry over and he can't sort of build on this. But to me, it says a great deal that Berhalter gave him that chance, because you knew this was going to be a different type of game than the two you just played. Somebody was going to get all kinds of opportunities, and Berhalter wanted it to be Ferreira. And Ferreira took them at a high level. So, of course, nothing is decided at this point. That Ferreira could get hurt. He could have 2 bad performances in September, and Berhalter decides we need to go with somebody in better form. He could be playing poorly for FC Dallas come November. All kinds of things could happen between now and the beginning of the World Cup. But this was a performance I was fully prepared to completely disregard. And Ferreira did not allow me to do that. He was that clinical, that impressive, and you don't need it to be perfect at the number 9. I mean, France just won a World Cup without their number 9 contributing any goals. Now, Olivier Giroud does so many other things that got overlooked in that World Cup, and the fact he has Kylian Mbappe running on his wing certainly helps that. He fit perfectly into the larger system that France has that doesn't exactly translate to this conversation about the U.S. The point being, you don't need a bazillion goals from your number 9, especially if he can do some of that other stuff, linking up, setting the table for your Christian Pulisic and Giovanni Reynas of the world. But somebody's got to capitalize on these chances when they come. And Ferreira does a really good job of putting himself in position to get those opportunities. He just hadn't been converting them. And it's not like these were tap-ins, which is why I put some stock into this and really think it does matter at the end of the day. Like I said, I was convinced there was going to be nothing to talk about coming out of these 2 games. From a big picture, what does this mean for the World Cup standpoint? Maybe I end up being right about that. But now, I'm betting I'm wrong. And that performance is going to be a major sort of marker. And it did enough to change my mind. If I have to, I might still personally lean Weah, but I was very much of the mindset that this is way up in the air. Nobody has an advantage. To me, this is now once again Ferreira's job to lose. Just the confluence of factors and sort of the context of this performance, where it is in this World Cup buildup, the fact that there aren't many games left, especially ones that are going to give you some really good data, and that he answered the questions and did what Nobody else had been really able to for extended periods. Now, of course, he had that dry spell right before, but if that's all he needs, and he keeps scoring with FC Dallas, he's gonna be the guy in these final two tune-ups in Europe. And if he does well enough there, he's gonna be the starter come day one at the World Cup. And so this was a really, really good decision on Berhalter's part to give him another start. That ultimately I just didn't think was going to matter all that much. It could end up mattering a great deal. Across the pond, I also want to address what is happening in the Nations League. Not because anybody really understands the overall significance of the Nations League, but I want to look at this from a World Cup standpoint, because that is the focus, of course, for everybody right now. So England and France have played 3 Nations League games apiece in this big international window. They have won none of them. England has not scored a goal from the run of play. Their only goal came as a Harry Kane penalty. France drew Austria and Croatia and lost to Denmark. No red flags or big concerns about drawing Croatia or losing to Denmark specifically. The Austria draw wasn't as great. But this is also the most talented team in the world. But the bigger point I want to get to here is recently, these last couple World Cups, we have really gotten to a place where UEFA nations, European countries, have been dominant. From even sort of going back, you had Spain, and then Germany, and then France as kind of your best teams in the world. Right, you had Croatia and France get in there at the final of the last World Cup. It has not been balanced where you have, say, a South American traditional power right there as your number 2 team in the world, or making, of course, Argentina has made a final in this messy era, a World Cup final. But you never really felt like Argentina or Brazil were really pushing to be the top team in the world. It's always been about the Belgiums, the Frances, the Spains, the Germanys, first and foremost. And I'm just seeing these Nations League results come in, and all this conversation about the struggles of the English team. The same English team that just went semifinals of a World Cup European final, all of a sudden can't score a goal. And the more I see in the build-up to this World Cup, the more I'm leaning toward this is going to be the World Cup where South America reasserts its dominance. Brazil is the most in sync, has the best combination of talent and chemistry right now from a what they are doing on the field standpoint and the way they're performing. Argentina is the most informed team in the world. Argentina is not as talented as these other teams we're talking about. Your 3 favorites, according to the sports books, are Brazil, France, and England, in that order. Argentina is not on their level. But I'm not about to rule out a Lionel Messi with this massive weight of international success lifted off of his shoulders, being able to play freely and enjoy, for probably the first time ever, being part of the Argentinian national team. I'm not willing to dismiss that. That's a huge deal. And you're seeing it in their performances. Brazil is just firing on all cylinders, and we're sitting over here, England can't score, France can't win. And then you have the other part of this, which is kind of these 2 teams are in completely separate, or sort of polar opposites from a, what does a worst case scenario look like? Because for England, it is this. They can't score, they're too conservative, they don't use all of these attacking weapons they have well enough. Gareth Southgate just sort of keeps things too close to the vest and doesn't let his team play. For France, it is what you saw at the Euros. Um, Inter squad turmoil, people not getting along, family members criticize, the whole Rabiot Mbappe situation. Benzema is now back in this team after being just completely excluded from it because of the whole blackmailing, again, inner turmoil. That's where this falls apart for France. Is that the personalities don't mesh. They're not operating as a unit. There's no chemistry. They're not playing together. England doesn't have that problem. England just sometimes doesn't realize their potential. So you've got the sort of two polar opposites in the sense of where does this go bad. And yes, from a Brazil standpoint, you are still talking about can Neymar find a way to be the best player on the best team in the world and also not and balance that with the incredible talent around him and actually elevate this team rather than hinder it. That is a question I have. We'll get more into this as we do World Cup preview for Brazil and talk more about the tournament as it gets closer. Argentina, it's very simply, do they actually have the talent to win the whole thing? I mean, my answer is yes, but again, player to player, talent is not quite as impressive as your Brazil's, your France's, etc. I'm just looking at these European teams, and I'm not convinced by any of them. Of course, this could all change, and France could easily win this tournament, be the best team from start to finish, and nobody would be surprised. But this is changing my thinking. And the more I look at this thing, the more I feel like this is we're at least going to get a South American team in the final. And I would not be shocked at all if we go into the final or even into the tournament expecting or predicting a South American team is going to win it. Because you just don't have a lot of time to fix these issues. And some of the best, Spain has looked decent. So that's an interesting one in terms of who could represent Europe on the World Cup stage. Netherlands have looked pretty good. I'm consistently getting higher and higher on them. Again, is there enough in that attack, though? You're asking Memphis Depay to carry it, which he's capable of, but is that enough to, when you're talking about France having Benzema and Mbappe and Griezmann, and you go down the list? So I just wanted to highlight this and put that as a food for thought that, it's not like the Nations League is difficult generally because how much stock are you putting in it? What kind of players are you calling up? This is pretty much your A squads, and may not be exactly your preferred 11s when you get to the World Cup and who's actually going to start, but it's pretty close. And this is 6 games, and England and France haven't won any of them. So, something that was at least worth paying attention to as we head into sort of out of this international break and into the next season and ultimately the World Cup. A couple domestic news and notes I also wanted to mention. Charlotte FC won at home again. They can't do anything on the road, but they are smack dab in the middle of the Eastern Conference because they just win at home all the time. They get another victory, their first game after the managerial change, beat the New York Red Bulls pretty comprehensively without their big players who are on international duty. It was, Ben Bender and Derek Jones scoring goals. So, and Christian Fuchs also was unavailable. So, good for them. They're so good at home, it might be enough to make the playoffs. We'll have to see. But it is, and you start looking at how some of these other expansion teams fared at home. Right now, about halfway through their home schedule, they are better than Atlanta United were. They are better than LAFC were right out of the gate, which is remarkable because they are nowhere near as good overall. They can't do anything on the road. But if you win your home games, it's enough to make the playoffs in this league. Christian Press left Angel City's game over the weekend with an injury. Hopefully, it is not too severe. Finally, able to, now that Angel City is playing, she's got an opportunity to get back into the U.S. national team picture with that roster coming out today for their upcoming international window. We'll see how this factors into it. Again, hopefully it's not a big deal. She's able to be in that squad and move forward with Angel City. But we don't know, so we'll just have to see. I wanted to mention that. Your NWSL game of the weekend delivered. Alex Morgan, Jess Fishlock score. San Diego Wave, OL Reign play to a 1-1 draw. Kaylin Sheridan, big weekend for her. She gets engaged and she gets a goalkeeper assist on Morgan's goal. Really good ball right over the top. Alex Morgan, terrific finish. It was just exactly what you expect from her. Clinical left foot, no doubt about it. And then OL Reign also with a terrific goal. Rose Lavelle heavily involved, gets the assist. Really good chip over the top. Jess Fishlock gets on it and smashes that thing into the upper corner. Ultimately, share the spoils, a point apiece. And then this morning it became official. Giorgio Chiellini is coming to LAFC. The idea of him being coached by Steve Cherundolo, who was coaching the Las Vegas Lights, a matter of months ago, is rather amusing. I am really curious to see how this plays out, what he actually offers on the field, how much he plays, what kind of value he brings from a leadership and experience standpoint, because you've got some younger players there. Of course, Carlos Vela is about the only player on this team that's gone anywhere near the level Chiellini's reached. And you've got a young coach, so can he help sort of as part of that? Cerundolo is doing a very good job. I'm a big believer in this team, and they've been so decimated by injuries that having another body is going to be useful. And of course, calling Giorgio Chiellini just another body is immensely disrespectful. He's one of the best center backs. I mean, arguably the best of his generation, one of the best in recent memory. So it's always fun when you get these guys to come over. This is very much not Lorenzo Insigne, who's in a couple weeks going to make his Toronto debut, or at least be eligible to. This is very different. I don't know what to expect, to be quite frank. But and this is again a team that has sort of gotten away from and from the beginning never really put a lot of emphasis on the big European star. That was very much an LA Galaxy thing, not an LAFC thing. And so now they're bringing in Chiellini. So welcome to Major League Soccer to him. We'll see how this goes and what he can offer LAFC as they sort of get back into the swing of things after this international break. That is all for this video. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube as well as Substack, and we'll be back for the live show on Wednesday.